Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I'll give it just a minute for folks to trickle in and we'll get started. All right, it looks like everyone's in the room. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on this June 5th for our weekly Trade and Tariff webinar. My name is Michelle Conley. I'm the Senior Director of Partnerships here at World Trade Center, Utah, and we appreciate you taking the time to be with us. I hope everyone's summer is off to a great start. I know people are off a lot on Fridays during the summer, so appreciate those of you that were able to join. And of course, we always record these webinars and it will be posted on our YouTube page so those that are out can catch up afterwards. Really excited about today's webinar. We get to hear from Kelvyn Cullimore, the president and CEO of BioUtah, which is a nonprofit trade association serving the life sciences community here in Utah. This came up probably 6 weeks ago, the importance of hearing specifically about the impact of the 232 tariffs on the pharmaceutical industry. And so Kelvyn's going to help us learn more about that, as well as more broadly how tariffs have been impacting his industry. And then, of course, before him, we'll hear from my colleague, Ben Collender, our chief of staff, who, I always say one of these weeks, maybe we won't have anything to talk about. This is not that week. There's actually a lot to talk about as far as updates. So we'll have the pleasure of hearing quite a bit from Ben today. Before I turn it over to him, I did want to share an event that's coming up that I thought would be of interest to many of you. The law firm Dorsey and Whitney, close partner of ours here in Utah, is hosting a webinar on Thursday, June 11th, called Tariff Refund Litigation Risks: What Claims Are Possible Against Importers Who Receive IEEPA Refunds. It's a free webinar. We just put the information and registration for that in the chat, so maybe of interest to some of you. So please feel free to register for that. As always, please jump in with questions at any time. Love to make sure that we're addressing your specific concerns. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ben.
Thanks, Michelle. And it's also a good reminder to say if you have not received your IEPA refunds yet and you're having some sort of an issue getting your refunds, please reach out to us. We're happy to hear from you and see what we can do to help. We've heard many companies starting to receive their refunds by now, and so you should be receiving yours. And if you're not, yeah, just remember we're a resource. So I'm going to share my screen for a minute. Here we go. So everybody knows this by now, but just so you, for if in case there's anybody here who hasn't been here before, this is our dashboard. You can go here, follow along as well, wtcutah.com/tariffs, where you can share a link to these webinars, and you can also get these updates. And you'll see why I'm going to try and be a little more dynamic today on the resources that we have on our dashboard so folks can see a little bit more about how to use it. But first up is that, we've heard a lot about China in the news. There was a big summit there a few weeks ago with President Xi and President Trump. Out of that, there was a discussion about having a trade board with China and the United States together, working through many of the issues. There's some public comment right now open for this. And what they're really seeking at the USTR level is what are the goods that really don't have a security risk that we can have open trade with China on. So if you have an argument that your product isn't really a national security risk, you're importing from China, this is a good one to go in and have some comment on. And we also have this with the 301 4-year review because this trade board's likely going to see a lot of those comments and make decisions based off of the 301 comments. So we also have these 301s have gone through a 4-year review once. Now we're going through it again. These are the ones with the lists from China, originally from 2017, 2018. I'll get my dates right. And so, you'll want to provide comment there as well if you're on one of those lists and you're looking for an exclusion. Make the case, get in comment, because if you don't, you won't be considered as these tariffs go into effect, or you won't have some legal recourse if you didn't feel that your comment was heard in the federal process. So, next up, we've got some tariffs on Brazil coming. So this is Section 301 tariff. These tariffs are in large part because the U.S. has several concerns over everything from, you can see here, their policies, practices related to digital trade, enforcement of payment services, unfair preferential tariffs, anti-corruption. They've got a laundry list. So this Federal Register is going to put the proposal from USTR is to put 25% tariffs on Brazil. That is open for comment. If you're looking for some sort of exclusion in that world, be sure to provide comment if you are importing goods from Brazil as well. Next up, we've got steel and aluminum. This one's tricky. This is one of those ones that will fly below the radar, and you won't even notice that you're going to get hit with additional tariff charges until you get your bill. There's no in-transit exemption. So if you were importing and expecting your goods in on the 3rd, and instead they came in on the 5th, you're paying an additional between 50 and 25% depending on your goods. So there was a proclamation that went out for announcement of further adjustments. I have all the details here and all of the lists and all of the reasons and the annexes and the HTS codes. So you want to go through if you're importing anything with steel and aluminum content, you want to be sure to check those lists to anticipate if you're going to be paying either 25 or 50% tariff, depending on if your good is solely steel and aluminum or if it's a portion of the content in a good. So something to pay attention to that can easily slip through the cracks if you're just importing, not thinking about it. And then especially if you're importing in bulk in this world, you can get some surprises in there that can hurt your bottom line as business. So next up, Vietnam. So I'm going to scroll down a few here. USTR put out a report, named several countries a few weeks back. Vietnam is the only one that was listed as a priority foreign country, but we had priority watch list, and watch list had a pretty long, lengthy list. Watch list had a shorter list, but Vietnam was the only one that made priority foreign country. And so through USTR's processes, they have a certain amount of time to go in and take action. They took action right within the window to say we're gonna look into their practices relating to intellectual property protection and enforcement. That's open where it's TBD on the rate. These tariffs normally take a year or so to go into effect. We anticipate these 301 tariffs will likely be implemented a bit faster than usual. These ones coming through even now, that we'll get into in a minute, are happening rather quickly. Reports go out, tariff notifications pretty quickly. We anticipate this continuing in the future. So we'll keep an eye on Vietnam. If you're importing from there, be aware that those tariffs are being considered. Um, Next up, this is a big one. 60 countries. This is another 301 tariff, and it's on goods not enforcing forced labor standards. So USTR published their findings, and it's here on our website. They're investigating, or they are recommending. They published their report as well. The final report's out. It's released. It's got all the details on what's driving their recommendations. But basically, what they conclude is on this long list of 60 countries, 12.5%. Now, there are two categories. One category is the general blanket. If you're not um, enforcing the forced labor imports of goods produced with forced labor, or if you don't even have any rules around it. There's a lower 10% tariff on six of the countries. It's Canada, Ecuador, EU, Indonesia, Mexico, and Pakistan. Those countries, in USTR's view, have imports that are maybe they have rules on the books, but they're not being enforced in USTR's view. So those countries get 10, everybody else gets 12.5. Um, and the last item, this has been a long one. There were a lot of updates this week. We're tracking USMCA, the joint review scheduled for early July. We've got, of course, the US and the US, Canada, and Mexico are all negotiating this. The United States is having bilateral negotiations with Mexico. These conversations are ongoing. There are meetings scheduled in mid-June here in the United States for another round of talks with Mexico, and then in early July in Mexico City as well. So, Canada also had basically put out a public statement asking the US and Mexico free trade agreement be renewed for 16 years as the existing trilateral agreement. The United States and Canada are having some disagreements on international trade policies and rules of origin. In particular, they're worried about transshipment into the United States. So this is an ongoing dialogue where the United States is engaging a little bit more with Mexico, let's say, and looking at these as two bilateral deals right now instead of the trilateral deal, which has been in place since the first Trump administration. So we're also continuing to track, as usual, the other 301s in place, particularly on excess capacity. We don't see any changes right now on the 122s that will end on July 24th, so just over a month from now. And, you know, the slew of other tariffs that are announced, but no formal action yet. We continue to monitor those and we'll bring those up as formal details become available, so that you can prepare and go on offense in this crazy trade environment right now. So, um, I've taken up a lot of time talking about tariff updates. So I'm gonna go quiet now, uh, and always
Thanks.
here to answer any questions. So.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ben. That is a lot this week. Thanks for walking us all through that. For everyone listening, I know that was also a lot for you. If there is any part of that you have additional questions on or want to dive deeper on, feel free to reach out to us. And now, pleased to welcome Kelvyn Cullimore, again, the president and CEO of BioUtah, to help us all understand more about tariffs going on in the life sciences industry. Welcome, Kelvyn.
Thank you, Michelle and Ben. Boy, Ben, you've got a big job tracking this. I mean, this stuff changes so frequently.
Over
I don't even know how you stay on
7,000
top of it.
last year. 7,000.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy. Yeah.
Well, we
Thank you.
we really appreciate everything the World Trade Center does. We count on you and the information you provide to our industry as well. For those who may not be familiar with BioUtah, life sciences, when we say life sciences, we're talking about medical device manufacturing, diagnostics, biopharmaceuticals, drugs, all that kind of stuff. Our industry here in Utah generates about 21 billion in GDP for the state, and we produce more than 180,000 jobs. So, and we're one of the fastest growing life sciences industries in the nation. So our industry, though, is deeply affected by the various tariff mechanisms being proposed or imposed by the administration, as been outlined. But before we get into more specifics, it's important to maybe provide a little context about these tariffs and the way our industry works. For better or worse, Trump tends to see tariffs as a tool to advance a number of his goals, including strengthening national security, strengthening U.S. manufacturing base, which doesn't always translate. We have companies who have actually moved manufacturing and jobs offshore because of this, although some have done it onshore as well. Onshoring and reshoring, leveling the playing field for domestic industries to compete, obtain concessions from foreign countries for non-trade policies, and also raise revenue. Taken separately or together, some of them have merit, but the tariff implications have real consequences for our industry as well as everybody else, and the innovative products that we deliver for patients. Many of our Utah life sciences companies were founded here and have grown into entities with a worldwide reach. Our industry in general has become more global in nature, and our supply networks are complex and can't really or easily be reconfigured. So, unlike other industries where you may be able to just change a vendor, um, the life science industry is heavily regulated. And so we operate under strict quality standards. And swapping a supplier or material in a medical device that comes from overseas, for instance, can require a lengthy revalidation or reapproval procedure from like FDA. So, in addition, devices may require highly specialized raw materials or parts from other countries where immediate alternative options aren't available. So, to mitigate risk, companies are working to develop multiple vendors or for supply resiliency, but that takes time and can increase costs. So, against this backdrop, there's a number of tariff buckets that impact our industry. I'll try and touch on them as we go through here. The IEEPA ones, as the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, got struck down. A lot of our companies are doing, as Ben has suggested, trying to get their rebates from that. But then we had the Section 122 tariffs, um, broad but limited in time frame following the Supreme Court decision and validating the IEEPA tariffs. The administration implemented that 10% global surcharge on imports under Section 122, which permits tariffs to severe trade balance of payments for severe balance of payments. And divided court of international trade has since struck those down, saying the administration didn't meet the trade imbalance criteria, but the decision only applies to the plaintiffs in the case. So the 10% tariff is still in place for everyone else as the administration appeals that decision. But goods imported under 122 tariffs can qualify for a number of exclusions, including pharmaceuticals, critical minerals, energy products, and others. Most important to note, however, is that these 122 tariffs are temporary by law, as Ben has just pointed out, and they only run for 150 days, so they're set to expire in July and take an act of Congress to extend them. We don't think that will happen. The other set of tariffs, the ones that we're focusing on today, the 232 investigations, one of them is on the pharmaceutical industry, which has been completed and has resulted in new tariffs. And then there's one related to medical devices that's still outstanding. Section 232 of the 1962 Trade Expansion Act gives the president authority to impose tariffs if the Department of Commerce determines that certain imported goods are a threat to national security. So, based on the 232 pharmaceutical investigation, the administration has determined that imported patented pharmaceuticals and their active ingredients or APIs are a risk to national security, and so has imposed tariffs of up to 100% on these imported goods. There are risks to national security in the sense that if we don't manufacture them here and we can't get them in the event of an emergency, that's how they deem it to be a national security issue. The tariffs take effect in July 31st, 2026 for specific large manufacturers and September 29th for all other manufacturers of pharmaceuticals. Tariff rates for companies are tiered, dependent on company commitments to domestic manufacturing and most favored nation drug pricing agreements. If you're not familiar with most favored nation, that's basically saying if you're selling your products overseas for one price, you got to sell them here for the same price, essentially. For example, if the U.S. drug company has an approved onshoring commitment where they're bringing some manufacturing back, the Department of Commerce has just recently released details on the process for companies to get approval for onshoring plans. Then the tariff rate drops to 20%. If a company has both an onshoring plan and an MFN agreement, the rate drops to zero. So MFN pricing agreements with the administration only reduce the tariffs when they are combined with an onshoring plan. So in other words, if a drug company says we'll follow the MFN pricing guidelines and we will bring some manufacturing back on shore, they can be exempted from the 232 tariffs. So clearly the policy imperative here is that a hard shove to incentivize pharmaceutical companies to bring the manufacturing back to the U.S. and to adopt international reference pricing. So we feel that the latter, which is another way of saying MFN, is much like importing foreign price controls, which could undermine the U.S. biotech leadership and give China a competitive advantage. Ironically, the exact opposite of what the administration wants to do. There are exceptions to these 232 tariffs, and they do not apply to generics, orphan drugs, biosimilars, nuclear medicines, and cell and gene therapies, and lower tariff rates come into play in country-specific trade agreements like with the UK, whose rate can be as low as 0% under a bilateral pricing deal. So while the 232 are there are lots of loopholes where it can be avoided, and it really boils down to being focused on patented drugs. So for drug companies that don't engage in any of these tariff relief pathways, the 232 tariffs can increase supply chain costs, potentially increase drug costs for us, and reduce capital available for R&D. So in Utah, we don't have a big branded pharma presence. Our footprint in this arena is largely in biotech and drug discovery. So in terms of impact of these 232 tariffs, our concern is more focused on how the duties could impede the availability of investment dollars that our smaller drug companies need to innovate and grow. The medical device section, they also have the 232 pharma tariffs, which are the impactful for the drugs. But here in Utah, it's the medical device industry that's the most impacted. And that investigation on medical devices could hit Utah even harder. Word is that medical device investigation is likely in its final stages. The report could be coming out soon. Once the report is delivered to the president, he has about 90 days to determine whether to implement tariffs or to make other trade adjustments. The administration's action on pharmaceuticals is an indication of what's in store for the medical devices. We could see tariffs imposed on medtech, along with a tiered set of rates, perhaps linked to onshoring commitments, but right now we just don't know. So while we're waiting for this shoe to drop, medtech companies are looking to mitigate potential impacts. Companies are examining ways to save dollars, reassess materials, et cetera, et cetera. Tariffs like interest rates and geopolitical uncertainty are becoming another variable in assessing operating conditions. Um, but again, trying to find ways to mitigate tariff risk is easier said than done, given the regulatory framework our industry and medtech operates under. Because of the complexity and precision involved in medtech manufacturing, changing a supplier can take years and require substantial investment. Also, because medical devices operate on fairly narrow margins, relatively speaking, it's difficult for manufacturers to pass along the higher costs. We've submitted comments, as Ben has suggested. We've tried to do that on several of these items. And now, finally, the 301 tariffs. On Tuesday, the administration proposed, as Ben pointed out, 60 countries at rates of 10 or 12.5% that failed to ban or enforce prohibitions on goods with forced labor. The list of goods is really extensive. Of the 60 countries investigated, some 56 have neither imposed nor effectively enforced a forced labor import prohibition. So they are subject to the 12.5% rate. The remaining 14 are the 10% rate, as Ben pointed out. According to the USTR, there's a lot of issues going on with this, but this one does carve out a number of exemptions. Pharmaceuticals and medicines are carved out of the 301s only because they are subject to the 232. So these things don't stack. If they're subject to the 232, they are exempt from the 301. We don't know what that means for medical devices because it does say currently imposed. And so we don't know if the 232 on medical devices comes out next, then what happens? We don't know if that does stack or not. We say it shouldn't, obviously, but we just aren't sure. And then we agree with Ben that USMCA, we should flag that because that's going to have an impact on us. So um, bottom line, to sum up, our industry is very much impacted by the tariff landscape, which can drive costs higher, create supply chain complications, and generate overall uncertainty. But our industry is committed to making a difference for health and wellness, and we will continue to work with the administration, state and local governments, World Trade Center, and other stakeholders to ensure life sciences ecosystem that supports and sustains medical innovation and economic growth. So that's a pretty quick overview. Essentially, the 232 on pharmaceuticals, lots of loopholes, but it does have an impact. Waiting for the med tech shoe to drop and see how that all stacks up with the 301 tariffs. So,
And Kelvin, you are doing so much awesome work in this realm, and I hope life science companies that aren't associated with you really get the full context of the amount of effort and time you put into that. In case in point, I'm going to share my screen for just a second. The tariffs that you just so well articulated on pharmaceuticals, This is a complicated, let's see where it is, exact fact sheet. Here we go. This is such a complicated situation. Oh, is it working? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, yep.
Um, because it applies to a company sometimes, it applies to a country sometimes, it applies to a product sometimes, and it just totally is such a complicated quagmire. And you just made it seem so simple. Here we go, not this one. Where is it? It's got to be the announcement section where it's like 3D chess. Anyway, we'll pull it up. Here we go. It's probably here. Nope, something went wrong on the Federal Register. That's okay. Um, but the point is like this is a complicated tariff, and if I'm a life sciences company, I'm like, or specifically in pharmaceuticals, I'm like, what? How do I respond to this? Particularly a smaller, medium-sized pharmaceutical company. Like, what does this mean? How do I navigate it? What do I do? And what you just walked through, you made something that's very complex, flow nicely. It's still complex, but and you guys have a pretty solid understanding of all of the details there. I did want to call out as well. So we went through the pharmaceuticals and the medical devices. The medical devices last had action in October, so it's been quietly moving along. Where is it? I just saw it. Here we go. Personal protective equipment. They launched the investigation, accepted public comment. This was, launched some time ago. Back in September, they launched it and then took public comment. So it's been quietly sitting there, as you said, Kelvin, just waiting for more updates on that 232. And so it's good you resurfaced that so that people are aware that's still sitting in the pipeline. It's still in queue. Watch out, pay attention, and adjust appropriately. Um, One question I have for you while we wait for others, and if others have comments, please provide them in the chat. I wonder what you see in terms of, how are companies and medical devices and the pharmaceuticals, obviously, how are they responding? Like, what do you see in terms of, you know, either advice that you could provide to a broad audience or healthcare innovation companies here or life science companies here with us on this webinar? What advice would you have? What are you seeing that works? How to go on offense in this instead of just be
Yeah,
focused and on your heels? What's that look like?
first of all, be very aware of how this impacts your supply chain, because
Mhm.
a lot of the tariffs, while they target the end product, the supply chain can be very impacted. I mean, just like steel and aluminum you talked about, a lot of that goes into medical devices. I mean, there are supply chain issues that you've got to be aware of. On top of that, for your own particular products, you've got to really look at where you are sourcing your materials. And, one of the things Trump wants to do is bring more manufacturing back. That is having an impact there. But I've also got companies who have operations in Europe or Asia who used to manufacture products here for those markets now have moved some of that manufacturing to those other locations so they can avoid the tariffs because under IEEPA they were paying tariffs both in and out. And so it was just horrible. So it's one of those things that you can't just assume let's weather this storm for another 2 years and then Trump will be gone. We won't have to worry about it. I think this is something they've got to be recognizing as part of the fabric of our industry now, and we've got to figure out how to make it work.
And I want to call out one other thing because our numbers were off and I was verifying it, and you're right, I was wrong. So I just want to call this out on the webinar on your guys' expertise that you called this out. The USTR 301 tariffs on the 60 countries, there are 14. So they had mentioned six in extreme violation, but had set the 12.5% only on 46, not on 54. And so, thanks for calling that out. We're going to make those adjustments on our dashboard as well.
Yeah, thank Denise. Denise is my expert on this. She's the one who trained me.
Yeah.
Great. Well,
So,
we're about at time. Thank you both so much. Really quick before everyone jumps off, I want to give a quick acknowledgement to one of our behind the scenes experts, Lena Triunfo, who's been with the
yeah.
organization for a while now and is instrumental in keeping this dashboard updated, in understanding tariffs, in flagging what we need to be watching for. Lena is leaving World Trade Center Utah next week, and she's actually joining World Trade Center Utah Northern California's team. So we're just so thrilled for her and grateful for all of her work and support of our work on this, and wish her all the best at her next World Trade Center adventure. So thank you, Lena. And everyone should just know that she's been such a huge part of all the information that you get to hear on Fridays and on our website. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you so much, Kelvyn, for that great presentation and overview. Again, lots of information today. Please feel free to reach out to us if you want to discuss any more about what Ben updated on, or if you'd like to connect with Kelvyn to discuss anything related to life sciences. And I hope everyone has a great weekend, and we'll see you next Friday.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.